Hello, welcome back to Fox Beats Fire and back to my beginners programming series. So today we're going to be going over two very important features in programming. These are loops and lists. Loops are generally used to repeatedly go over a little block of code until you tell it to stop, and lists are used to store large amounts of data, so you can store loads of strings or you can store loads of integers. So we're going to go ahead and open up Visual Studios. If you haven't already opened that up or got that installed even, then you're going to have to go and watch video one, look at how to download and install it, and make sure you're getting the right packages associated with downloading it. So we're going to make a new project. It's going to be exactly the same as last time. You're going to go click New Project, and you can type C# and make sure you get in console at .NET Core. And give it whatever name you want to give it, and open it up. Let it build your project. So the first thing I'm going to say before we actually get started is that you're going to need to know what a using statement is, because we're going to add one in. So up here you'll see it say using statement. I didn't explain anything about this last time, but what a using statement is it usually gives us access to something called a library. And a library is basically a big set of functionality that will mean that we have to do a lot less work, so we don't have to manually code things. We can just sort of call it from this library. And the using statement we're going to use is going to be system. So just sort of try and copy it in as I am here. System.collections.generic. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us access to the list functionality so that we can create and use lists to the full extent. So I'm going to go over lists before I get into loops, because there's a few different types of loops and it's going to be a bit longer, whereas lists is going to be quicker. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a list. So a list is, you can treat it kind of as a variable a little bit when you're setting it up. So you're going to type in a list, and then you're going to go less than and greater than. And within those two symbols, what you're going to do is you're going to type int. And then you're going to give the list a name, so we'll call it my list. And we'll make it equal, my list, and we'll make it equal to, this is not going well, new list of int, like that. Okay, so that is basically syntax for creating a list. I'll go over it one more time. What we've got here is you basically just type list, you tell the compiler that you want a list, then you tell it what you want to store in this list, so we want to store integers, we want to store numbers, then you give it a name, and you make it equal to a new list. And what this section does is it actually creates the list. Then there are two ways that we can actually add numbers and values into this list. The first way we could do it is you could give two parentheses instead of two brackets to the end like that, and then you could basically go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or if you were going to do it with strings, you'd go string, 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 string. The other way you can add stuff in is you can go not console, what am I about? You can go mylist.add. Oh, it shouldn't go on cap locks there. So you go my list, you type the name of your list, and then you go dot, and you'll see the add pops up. You then give it two brackets and pass it the item that you want to add to the list. So if I want to add in the number 127, like that, that will now add that number into the list. So how do we actually access the values in the list? Well, if I was just to do a console.write line like this, and then I was to say type my list, and then you're going to give it square brackets like that, and you'll find those near where your parentheses are. You'll be able to work it out. And whenever you're calling an item from a list, you go square brackets, and then you have to give it a number. And what that number is, it's an index for the item that you want to get. So if I want to get the number 1, I would type in the index 0, because the index is always 1 less than the actual number that you would think it is. So if I want to get the number 2 from that list, then I would type in my list, square brackets, and I would put the number 1 in those square brackets. So if I type in my list 0, and then what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this a couple of times so you can see what I mean. Go on computer. There we go. Oop, no. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the index in these boxes like that, so that we're going to get 3 different values. And what this should do is it should print out the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 when I run it. So Control F5 in case you've forgotten how to run it. Then there you go. It's printed off 1, 2, 3. Just as we thought it would. Okay, so what else can we do with lists? Well, we can actually remove items from it. So if we wanted to go, if we wanted to remove an item, let's say we wanted to remove the first letter in the list, or first number in the list, which is 1, we would go my list, and then .remove, and then we just type in 1 like that. So what that's going to do is it's going to look for the item 1 in the list, and it's going to remove it. So if I go console.write line, just to show you what I mean, and then I type in index 0, my list, and I say I want to print off the index 0, because 1's been removed, 2 should now be in that 0 index. And there you go, it's printing off the number 2. Alright, so let's say you don't know what the value is you want to remove, but you just want to remove the item at a specific position. So there is a way to do that. And what the way is to go my list, and then you go remove at, There you go, you see it pops up there. Remove that, and then instead of giving it the value that you want to remove, you give it the index that you want to remove the value at. So if I was to go index, let's say 0 again, that's going to remove, so we've already removed the number 1, and the 2 is now in the 0 index, so now if we remove at index 0, it's going to remove that number 2. So if I go console.writeLine one more time, and type in my list dots, nope, not dots, and then index 0, like that. I'm not typing well today. And then we go Control F5 to run it. You'll see it's printed off the number 3 because first we removed the number 1, and then it's printed off the number 2 up here. And then we've removed the item at index 0, which was 2, so it's now printed off 3 because 3 has become the 0 index. Now, one more thing I'm going to show you with lists before we go ahead and move on to loops is how to clear the entire list, and it's just another little function. There are loads of little functions you can do associated with lists, and maybe you can have a look through them after the video, or pause the video and have a look at the other functionality, but there is a lot you can do with it. So if I was just to type in my list and then .clear, like that, what that'll do is that will completely empty the list. So there will be nothing in it at all. And there is one other thing that I forgot to show you, and that is mylist.count. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that because we don't want it there. But you can also get the length of the list, and this can be very useful, especially when you're working with loops. So if you want to go through the list and check the item at each index over and over again, you would use a loop. But in order to use a loop, then you'd want to check the length of the string. We'll get onto why in a minute when we go into loops. But if I wanted to get the length of the string, then what I would do is I would go, let's say int string list length, not string, sorry, list underscore, and we'll just say length, if I can type it, is equal to, and then we're going to go my list dot, and then you're going to put count. In some languages it might be dot length. For example, in JavaScript it's dot length, and you don't need brackets because it's not a function. And then if I was to console.writeLine and list length, give it a semicolon and print. In the console, it's saying that is printing off the length of the list. So we did have a list of length 5 to begin with, and then we added a value. We added the value 127. We then removed the value, so it went up to 6 and then back down to 5, and then we removed the 0 index, so it's gone down to 4, and it's printed off the number 4 for that reason. So that's a quick example of how to do that there. So that's pretty much it for lists. Now I'm going to go on to loops. One thing I should have actually mentioned as well is you might see people using arrays a lot, and arrays are similar to lists, but lists are generally a bit easier to work with, which is why I've shown them. I usually use lists when I'm programming instead of arrays unless I have to use an array. We're going to get onto loops now, and there are two main ways that you would do a loop. There are while loops and there are for loops. And there are different reasons why you use while loops over for loops and for loops over while loops, but they both have their specific upsides and downsides. Generally, if you're going to iterate through a list, you would use a for loop. Whereas if you were going to just repeat a section of code that you wanted to repeat until an exit condition was reached, you'd use a while loop. So we'll go over a while loop dead quick first. And this is the syntax for while loop. So you're going to go while, 2 brackets, and then you're going to give it some parentheses. And whatever you put inside these brackets is the condition. So if I was to put while true, then and not set that to false ever, then the loop would run forever because it's always true. What goes between the parentheses is the code that you want to run over and over again. So if I was to go console.writeLine and then run this like that, and then what I'm going to do, just for argument's sake, is I'm going to put console.readline in just to show you what's going on here. I have a really itchy nose today. You can probably see the fact that I'm rubbing it all the time. So if I now run this code, what it's going to do is it's going to run this, and every time I press enter, it's just going to run it again, because there is no reason for it to exit because I haven't given it a reason. Now, if I was to give it if I was to create an int here, and we'll just go call count is equal to 0, and then we can go while count is less than 10, we can run this off, and we are also going to have to increment the count there. So if I was now to go count plus plus, like so, and then run it, what it's going to do is it's going to enter the while loop at the count value 0. It's then going to run this, and then it's going to add 1 to count so that the count is now equal to 1. It'll do that over and over again until the count is equal to 10, and then it's going to break out of the while loop, and then what we can do is just do a console.writeLine, and we'll go count is equal to, and then we'll write, give it a plus, and then we'll type in the value count. So if I now run this, just so you can see what's going on, Control F5 it, run this, 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 and then it's printing off the value of count, which will be 10. So that's how while loops work, and there are several operations that you can put within these brackets, and I'm going to go over those right now. So it's a bit like if statements in that regard. Of you've got your greater than, you've got your less than. No, you've got your greater than, you've got your less than, you've got your equal to, and you've got your not equal to. Now, there are a couple others as well, and I'm not going to go into all of them. You can look them up if you want to know. But those are generally the arguments that you're going to use within a while loop. The other type of loop that we're going to go over in this episode is a for loop. And it does a similar job, but generally for loops are going to be used to iterate through lists, because you have a bit more freedom with while loops. You can sort of do whatever you want with it, whereas for loops are a bit more concise, a bit better to use and a bit cleaner, but you don't have as much freedom with how you implement it. So when you're setting up a for loop, there are two ways to do it in C#. The main way, and the way that most languages will look pretty similar to, is this. So you're going to go for, and then you're going to define an int. And we'll call that int I, and give it a value of 0, like that. And then you're going to put a semicolon, because we're going to give it another argument here, or another condition, if you like. And the next condition we're going to go is we're going to go while I is less than 10, and then another semicolon, and then we're going to increment it. So instead of having to manually do it in the rest of the code, then it's all done within the for loop brackets. And then instead of these parentheses, just like it was with the while loop, you're going to put the code that you want to run. So if I go console.writeLine, console.writeLine, and then we'll just print off the number of I. And they'll do that over and over again from 0 up to 10. So if I now control F5 that, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it's not going to print 10 because it wouldn't do that unless I did this. If I was to make this less than or equal to 10, it would now print 10 as well, like that. So the other type of for loop that you can use is called a for each loop. So if I was to go for each, like that, and then you're going to need some kind of list with this. It works slightly differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a list to use with the for each loop. So if I create a list here, hopefully you can remember how to do this. A list of int, and we'll call it my list again, is equal to new list. And we're just going to give it some numbers, 1 to 10, like that. Again, you could use strings with this if you wanted to. I'm just using numbers for the sake of this. And then within your for each loop, what you're going to do is you're going to go for each and then int I, so you have to give it a variable name. So int I, and then you're going to type it in, and you're going to type my list, and then give it your parentheses. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at the list, my list, and for every integer in that list, it's going to do whatever I ask it to do. So if I go console.writeLine and type I again, it's going to print every integer in that list, just like the other one did. So again, you could do this with strings. For example, if all of those values were strings, you would put for, and then string, and then name this whatever you want in my list, and then it would print all the strings in that list. So that's pretty much all there is to know, for the most part, about lists and strings. I've shown you how to iterate through a list, and or I have at least with a for each loop. I guess I'll show you that with the normal for loop now as well. So if I was just to give it a normal for loop, and we'll go int I, this is what we did a minute ago, int I, well I is less than, and this is where it gets interesting, because what we can do is we can do my list, and then we can go .count. Hopefully you remember that. So what that's doing is, whilst I is less than the length of the list, it's going to increase I and iterate through the loop. And then we can go console.writeLine, and we can go and print off I, just like we did before. So if I now go ahead and run this, Control F5, you'll see it prints off the values 0 through 9. And that's all well and good, but you'll notice that it's missed off the number 10 from there. And that's no good, because we wanted to print everything in the list. Now the reason for that is obviously I is equal to 0, and what is basically is printing off all the items whilst I is less than my list.count, and the number of numbers within the list is 10. When I gets to 10, which is the 10th number, it's going to break out of the loop because my list.count is equal to 10. So in order to get around this, what we need to do is we need to add in a little equals to sign there, like we did before, and then Control F5, and it's going to print off all of the items in the list again. So that's pretty much all there is to loops and lists. You can go into more complexity, and it is worth having a good look at loops and really trying to do some interesting little challenges with them. So maybe you could do a challenge where you add all of the values in a list together, or maybe you could do like a Fibonacci thing, something like that, based on a list. It's up to you, but definitely go ahead and practice loops. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully that was useful, and I'm sorry I keep itching my nose. It's doing my head in and I can't stand it. But yeah, I'm not re-recording this. It's absolutely fine. So thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'll be putting out more tutorials in the future.